in the south are the remnants, the bomblets of cluster bombing. Cluster bombing, so that listeners should know, is where a bomb comes down and explodes before hitting the ground, scattering in all directions hundreds, thousands of bomblets, which is a nice, cute word, bomblets, which is quite an appropriate word because actually they look quite cute. They look almost irresistible to pick up. If you can imagine a very small squash ball, shiny, that's what they look like a black chestnut or like a large black marble. But if you pick them up, you won't have a hand left once you've done so. And if you stand on them, you won't have a leg left either. These munitions, used in heavily built-up civilian areas, constitute a war crime. Simple. And I have the evidence myself today. I have taken pictures and film and stood over innumerable examples of the use of this cluster bomb munitions. And of course, they sit there irresistibly like an accident waiting to happen, especially for the Lebanese children. They constitute, in that sense, the equivalent of a landmine. But hey, I found landmines too. Inside houses, landmines had been planted by the invading Israeli forces, presumably in the hope of taking the legs or the life of a Hezbollah fighter, but caring not whether the legs or the life belonged to somebody else who might enter that house. In Bint Jubail, the worst damaged of the southern Lebanese towns, virtually nothing is left standing. The center of the city looks like it's been hit by an atomic bomb. Not a stone or stick remains undamaged. Most of the houses have crumbled into rubble and ash. Even the mosque, even the school, even the hospital. And the population, once 40 to 50,000, has been forcibly reduced to 5,000 because unlike other Lebanese towns and villages, the refugees have not been able to return to Bint Jubail in any larger numbers because there's simply nowhere to take shelter. And where there is anything left standing, the danger of unexploded ordnance is just too dangerous. What I did see today for the first time, which will be of interest to listeners, was the famous UNIFIL, the United Nations Armed Forces, which are going to be considerably beefed up in the next few days. They were out in force today, most of them African soldiers from Ghana, many of them women soldiers from Ghana, and I can tell you it's a splendid sight. The blue helmet and the blue armored waistcoat fitting snugly around the bodies of the Ghanaian women armed forces in their United Nations role. I'm not sure how the Hezbollah will deal with them. I'm not sure how the local Lebanese villagers will see black African women soldiers wearing blue helmets, but we must hope that they are able to fulfill their role without let or hindrance. But the tension that has persisted since the end of the war was palpable along the whole of the Lebanese border with Israel. Everyone is afraid that this fighting is going to flare up again because the political solution which is required to put this, one of the longest running conflicts of the 20th century, now stretching into the 21st, behind us, just don't look like they're on the agenda. And we discussed last night, we will again tonight, just what that solution needs to be. 08704 20 20 20, or you can text me on 81089, 50 pence per text, and normal sending charges applying, of course. And if you're near a computer, you can email me through the website at talksport.net. And don't worry about the fact that I can't personally see the emails. Duncan Glass will be doing as James Whale did admirably last night, holding the fort in London, making sure that the emails, texts, and calls get through to me, and also helping me across the next 2 hours of quite a difficult radio assignment, having a talk show from a war zone thousands of miles away, isn't easy and isn't without its technical difficulties. And I'm very grateful to Duncan for playing that role this evening. But don't worry that I won't see those emails, because they'll be kept for me, and as usual, my staff will attempt to answer any of the points that people raise with me. So 08704 20 20 20, text 81089, or email through the website at talksport.net. We're talking about the war and peace in Lebanon and what it all means for the future of the Middle East and therefore for the future of the world. Duncan, we haven't been properly or formally introduced, but we're right in the deep end this evening.
We certainly are, George. It's good to talk to you this evening. The emails and texts are starting to stack up. 81089. Email is via talksport.net, and of course the calls 08704 20 20 20. We were doing this last night. We're doing it again this evening, making radio phone-in history with the first ever radio phone-in broadcast live from inside a war zone. And George, you have that accolade. It's just very sad that it's in such circumstances. I was doing a search on the internet before we came on air at 8 o'clock. I was looking at the ceasefirecampaign.org website that has a total of 1,226 innocent civilians killed to date in the 34 days of the conflict, of the fighting. Do you think that's realistic?
Well, I do, and I smelt some of them today, Duncan. It's not an easy thing to describe on the radio or on television for that matter. But death has almost a sweet smell. These scenes that I witnessed today, with this huge levels of crushed masonry and scattered with the unexploded ordnance, means that many of these bodies have simply not been able to be recovered. But the dogs are in about the rubble in order to try and eat them. And it's a horrific scene. People throw stones at the dogs to get them away because they're afraid that the dogs are going to reach some bodies underneath the rubble. And the fetid, sweet stench of dead bodies was absolutely prevalent in a windless day, very, very hot, 40 or 42 degrees centigrade in the south of Lebanon. No shade because it's all been knocked down. The trees have all been burned. It's quite a sight, you know, to see palm trees with no leaves on them, scorched like everything else in the 34-day war. So that level of death does not at all surprise me, and it was all completely unnecessary, Duncan, because we learned tonight from Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, that he's now in discussion with the Israeli government about a prisoner exchange, exchanging the soldiers that they took captive for a very large number of Lebanese and Palestinian prisoners held in Israeli jails, which could, of course, have solved this problem without a war in the first place.
Okay, we'll keep an eye on that story as the show goes on. 08704 20 20 20 is the number if you'd like to talk to George Galloway live in Lebanon. Let's get some calls on air. Pete's in Leicester. Pete, you're on Talk Sporting. You're through to George.
Hi there, Pete.
Hello, Pete in Leicester. Okay, Pete's gone. Let's go to Ronnie. Ronnie, who's in Mill Hill. Ronnie, you're on Talk Sport. Good evening.
Good evening to you.
You're through to George in Beirut.
Yes, so I believe.
Hello, Ronnie.
Hello, George. Fellow Scotsman.
Okay.
George, I don't know if you're about the same age as me. Would you be nearly 60, or are you younger?
No, I just look nearly 60, Ronnie. I'm 52.
You're 52, right. So you will not remember the Six-Day War? Not much of it.
Well, only as a child.
Only as a child, right. Well, I remember it very clearly, being a bit older. Now, you know the reason for the Six-Day War.
Well, I have a feeling you're going to have a different reason from me, but go ahead.
Right. Gamal Abdel Nasser.
Let's not be too didactic about this. Just
No. Let's keep it on a nice level. I've got a few points I'd like to make, then you answer me, and maybe I could come back. Let's do it properly.